not only died of an overdose, but she was murdered.
Kiss on the hand may be quite continental, but diamonds are a girl's best friend.
Baby, you better remember you're my baby when they give you the I, my.
Although I know that you care, won't you ride and declare?
We're going to start today's episode off on Wilshire Boulevard and Glendon Avenue. This cemetery has more celebrities than any other cemetery in the United States and even the world. Especially how small it is. It's a hidden gem right here amongst these gigantic buildings in Westwood, California. Here she is, guys, right over here. Marilyn Monroe. Good morning, Marilyn. Nice to see you. Hey guys, TVG here reporting from Pierce Brothers Westwood Village Memorial Park in Westwood, California. As of today's recording, it's January 22nd, 2023 at around 7:30 a.m. I'm standing at the crypt of Marilyn Monroe. And in today's episode, I'm going to tell you who murdered Marilyn Monroe. Beyond a reasonable doubt, the only person that had opportunity, the only person that had motive, and he actually was part of the private funeral and ceremony right here of 25 people of her personal inner circle. I'm going to focus on August 4th, 1962, the evening before Marilyn Monroe was murdered, leading up to August 5th, 1962, when she was pronounced dead at the scene. I'm going to block out all the noise and bring you only the facts of the night that she was murdered. I'm going to bring you all the evidence, my findings and conclusion and theory. Let's take a look and see what we can find.
A kiss may be grand, but it won't pay the rental on your humble flat, or help you at the automat. Men grow cold as girls grow old, and we all lose our...
Okay guys, I'm here at our first destination, UCLA. UCLA, the college, the university, right here in Westwood, California. Let me introduce to you the person that murdered Marilyn Monroe, the scum of the earth, the piece of crap. The person who murdered Marilyn Monroe is Dr. Ralph Greenson. It's a known fact. He's a top psychiatrist, a top psychologist, a psychoanalyst. He was the top in the world. He worked right here at a UCLA. And he was introduced to Marilyn Monroe to help her balance her life, her work life, and the movies, and her personal life. And they wanted to psychoanalyze Marilyn Monroe, I guess. So Marilyn Monroe, when she was introduced to him in 1960, she thought, this is someone I need to work with. So of course Marilyn Monroe went along with it, and she thought he was going to be a savior and help her. But just because someone has a track record doesn't mean they're a good doctor. He broke every doctor-patient codes and rules of conduct and professional trust. And he turned out to be the lowest scumbag that you'll ever imagine in your life. That he was a monster. that his behavior was atrocious. Dr. Ralph Greenson turned out to be a real dirtbag. What he did was so disgusting that any father would be mortified by his behavior as a doctor. And the way he took advantage of Marilyn Monroe was disgusting. He had inappropriate relations with her, he molested her, and all he did was rape her under the influence. He ended up doing things that were just unthinkable, leading to her murder. And she trusted him, and that was a deadly mistake. Took advantage of her and ultimately took her life. Let's continue.
Bye-bye, baby. Remember you're my baby when they give you the eye. Although I know that you care, won't you write and declare that though...
Okay guys, I'm here in West Los Angeles. I'm going to show you the house that Dr. Ralph Greenson owned at the time in 1960 through 1962. And Marilyn Monroe would come up here to his home office at least 4 times a week, and it turned out to be every day. He had her so hooked on barbiturates and drugs and ups and downs and ins and outs, you wouldn't believe it. So they make an arrangement for Marilyn Monroe to visit him at his home office, and it would be easier for both of them. So she would come here to his house, and she would have dinner here and wait for him to come home from work. She would come over here like as if she wanted to be part of his family, when in fact she probably just wanted the drugs. She didn't want anything to do with this guy. She just wanted the drugs. And so she would come here and play on the streets here, probably with his daughters, because she wanted the prescription medication. And he would dole it out to her. And he knew better than that. He knew better than that. But he had her so addicted and turned her into a drug addict. So she kept coming back here.
I just suspected that there was too much attachment.
Dr. Ralph Greenson admitted having inappropriate sexual relations with Marilyn Monroe. And a doctor that would do that to a patient is just such a piece of crap, a weasel, a scumbag, just so he could take advantage of her. A movie star. That's the house right to over my shoulder. This was the house that Dr. Ralph Greenson owned in the 1960s, and Marilyn Monroe would come here for her appointments, for her therapy appointments, where she would get the drugs. Look where he lived. This is a very wealthy area in West Los Angeles. I mean, you're right near the country club. You're in the hills. I mean, it's beautiful up here. Look, all the high rises. Okay, this is the top of the hill in West Los Angeles. These houses are about maybe $4 to $6 million, easy.
Dr. Greenson, he got in a great deal of trouble with the Psychoanalytic Institute and his peers because he did take her in his home almost as a family member, which was absolutely violated all the rules of psychoanalysis.
It was unorthodox, experimental, adventurous and dangerous.
And when Marilyn Monroe would come here for her appointments, there'd be crowds of people on the street and limos would line up and down the street because everyone knew in the area that Marilyn Monroe was working with Dr. Greenson, and she had no one to look after her. She had no one to look after her. She's all on her own. And this animal, this goddamn animal here, okay, took advantage of her, got her addicted so he could have his way with her. And he ultimately murdered her to keep her quiet so she wouldn't go public with his misdeeds. Nowadays, the doctors are being charged, and this is a perfect example. This piece of crap should be charged for murder right here. This piece of shit. What Dr. Ralph Greenson did to Marilyn Monroe is disgusting. It's atrocious. She was so dependent. And that's what Dr. Greenson wanted. He debilitated Marilyn Monroe. He had his hand in everything she did. He basically manipulates using the drugs to get Marilyn Monroe to do whatever he wants. And he inserts himself in between himself and all her relationships, including with the studios. He raped her. If she came out with that information, and he didn't want that to happen. He didn't want that to go public. So he ultimately had to kill her to keep her silent. He would have lost his license. He would have lost his credibility. He would have lost his stature in the community. He would have lost everything, his wife, the kids. So that little weasel concocted a way to eliminate the threat, Marilyn Monroe. And he decided to murder her because no one would find out. It's a perfect crime. Let's continue.
I wanna be loved by you, just you, nobody else but you. I wanna be loved by you alone, boop boopy doo. I wanna be kissed by you, just you, nobody else but you. I wanna be kissed by you alone.
Sorry to bother you guys. You know what Court of Book is? Court of Book. Yeah.
Yeah, it's right behind me.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Okay, guys. We're getting close. We're getting close. I'm here at the cemetery. Okay, guys, I'm here at the Hillside Memorial Park and Mortuary in Culver City, Los Angeles. And this is where the person that murdered Marilyn Monroe is buried. And here's his grave, guys. Here's his crypt. Right in the wall. Right up there. So this is where the disgraced doctor who killed Marilyn Monroe is laid to rest. Right there. His name is Dr. Ralph Romero Greenson, MD. Born 1911 in Brooklyn, New York. Died in 1979 in Los Angeles at the age of 68. She was on her own. She was born through the orphanage system. She was susceptible. But Dr. Greenson, the disgraced doctor, the piece of crap, the unprofessional scum that he was, took advantage of the situation. That night, she decided to not do therapy anymore with him. She actually got her last bill, and she didn't want to see him anymore, and she was cutting ties with him. And he ultimately ended her life. He freaked out. He was completely addicted to her. It was a very toxic situation, a toxic relationship between both of them. He panics, and he's scared to lose her, but he's also scared for her to come forward and ruin his career and possibly get him arrested for his illegal behavior. He was a narcissist, a control freak, and he wanted to control everything in her life, and it was slipping. It was slipping away. She was getting older. She had men telling her what to do, like Joe DiMaggio and other men, and she had other people telling her what to do, and Dr. Greenson's hand, his grasp was slipping, and he started to feel desperate and get desperate, and he started to feel small, like the man he truly is. So he decides to administer a concoction, an overdose, rectally through an enema, a deadly dose of medication to kill her. He lashed out. Her death certificate says August 5th because they found her on August 5th, 1962, but she could have been killed earlier on August 4th. So there's always that little controversy, August 4th, August 5th, but on her death certificate it's August 5th. But it could have happened on August 4th. Marilyn Monroe just had purchased that home. So on August 4th, 1962, she was in incredible spirits, and all her friends said she sounded better than ever. And at 7 p.m. that night on August 4th, 1962, she got a phone call from her friend and Dr. Ralph Greenson answered the phone and said, "She's not home." Said, "Marilyn Monroe is not here. She's not home," which was a lie.
I called her at 6 o'clock, and Greenson answered. She said, "She's not here." It could have been so easily that she was busy, which I would have accepted. She's not here. I think somebody done her in.
Which made her friend very suspicious. He said if she said she was in the bathroom or something, fine, but she just got a brand new house. She's so excited to decorate it. She's not going to leave the house. They had plans. And then her publicist got a phone call at around 10 p.m. He was in the middle of a show at the Hollywood Bowl. And he took the phone call and they said Marilyn Monroe is hanging on to life. She's clinging on to life. She could possibly die.
This day I was at a concert at the Hollywood Bowl with Mr. and Mrs. Mervyn Leroy and my husband Arthur Jacobs. And in the middle of the concert,
but someone came to our box and said, "Arthur." They didn't even say Mr. Jacobs. They said, "Arthur, now." And he said, "Don't tell me." And it was Marilyn. She was already dead.
About what time of night was that?
9:30, 10. It was in the middle of the concert.
Eunice Murray, that's Marilyn Monroe's housekeeper. She was hired by Dr. Ralph Greenson.
I saw Marilyn lying on the bed, nude, and I was just alarmed.
And then at 12:15, Eunice Murray calls Dr. Greenson to come to the house. Something's wrong with Marilyn Monroe. So he gets there supposedly at 3:15. The last time we hear from them was at 4:30 a.m. when they called 911. Covered the whole thing up.
The autopsy was performed by Dr. Thomas Noguchi, one of the top forensic pathologists in the country, a real-life Quincy. Also present was John Miner, the district attorney's liaison with the medical examiner's office at the time of Marilyn's death.
Her body was examined minutely by both of us under magnification to see if we could find any needle mark of any kind anywhere on her body. And her entire body was observed, and there were no needle marks.
Dr. Thomas Noguchi performed the autopsy on Monroe's body.
There was nothing indicated that is suicide without any question. For example, there was no suicide note, and certainly it is not typical suicide scene.
Also at the autopsy was John Miner.
I represented the bridge between the district attorney's office and the coroner's office. I should have called for a criminal investigation. It was apparent from the kind of discolorations that were present that the body had been moved after death.
We examined her body and found no needle mark whatsoever. So it can be ruled out that the barbiturate that killed her was administered by means of a hypodermic injection. The toxicologist found a 13% reading of the barbiturate in her liver, so that from the time she began absorbing Benembutol until the time that she died, there was an appreciable period of time, probably not less than an hour or two. How did the barbiturate get into her? The capsule has a yellow dye. On opening the stomach, there was no dye stain. One of the findings at the autopsy was that the lower portion of the colon, which is the large intestine, was discolored. It was a deep purplish color. If by means of the barbiturate coming through the use of an enema, the medical facts would be satisfied. And that would lead to the conclusion that Miss Monroe was murdered.
They found her lower portion of her stomach, which is her large intestines, to be colored, like purplish. And that can't happen from ingesting pills. As well as there was no water found at the scene. It would have taken 40 or plus pills they said she took. Plus they found no trace of taking any medication as far as the dye on the capsules. So the only way would have been an enema. That is the only way that she could have died. That they looked every inch of her body, there's no needle marks. And he had time, you know, she was coming to, he knocked her out, and he decided to murder her. And he gave her an enema with a concoction, a deadly concoction to kill her. And he got away with it. Dr. Ralph Greenson, he got away with it. And they didn't even go to a grand jury. No grand jury. Why? No grand jury. They saw suspicion. Let's put it to the grand jury. Let's take a look. But no grand jury. Sweep it under the rug. When the 911 call was placed, the watch commander of the West Los Angeles Police Department, LAPD, Sergeant Clemens, he was the first to arrive at the scene. And
Marilyn was stretched out, face down, in a soldier's position, catty-corner of the bed. Obviously, she'd been placed in that position. And I was shown the nightstand by her table, by her bed, and it was about 8 or 10 empty bottles that had contained medicine, all barbiturates. Dr. Greenson said she must have swallowed them all. I looked in the bathroom for a half-empty glass or a glass that had been used. There was none. I asked for, had anybody seen a document, any written statements, and no one had seen any written statements. There was no suicide note. The strangest thing to me at the time, and I will never forget it, was the attitude of Dr. Greenson.
The psychiatrist.
The psychiatrist. He was cocky, he was sarcastic, he was derogatory, he treated me with contempt, and he didn't get under my skin. I just simply kept looking at the man and trying to figure out why in the world is this man evidencing this attitude, because it doesn't fit.
So Sergeant Clemens gets the call, and he goes to the house, and the first thing he said was, he said it was staged, that it didn't look real, and there was no note, there was a lot of things missing, and they flip-flopped on their story a whole bunch of times, and Marilyn Monroe's body was moved, and position-wise, it was so obvious. There was no water. They claimed that they had taken numerous pills, which would have been like 40 of them, and it's impossible. It's impossible.
We gathered a great deal of information, and we determined that it was, in fact, a murder. This evidence was presented to the district attorney at that time, who refused to have anything to do with it.
What hard evidence do you have? I mean, you made a flat statement Marilyn Monroe was murdered.
Yes.
What hard evidence do you have to prove that?
It's in the coroner's report.
What evidence, though?
The amount of barbiturates in the bloodstream.
Marilyn Monroe's house was being remodeled on the day of her death. There was no drinking water in the entire house. How does one swallow 47 to 50 sleeping pills, and yet during the autopsy it's not found in her stomach lining?
That brings up the question, if she didn't swallow it, how did she get it?
He also got a statement from Eunice Murray and from Dr. Greenson on the scene that all of this happened 3 hours earlier than they originally said. Sergeant Clemens says, why'd you wait 3 hours to call the police? Why'd you wait 4 hours? Why'd you wait so long? And Dr. Greenson said he had to call the studios and the publicity department and her main physician, and it was all lies. It was all lies and a cover-up. They staged the scene, and he scared the crap out of Eunice Murray, She didn't know what the hell was going on.
I asked them very pointedly why it took from midnight, approximately midnight or 12:30 till about 4:30 to call the police. I'm standing looking at two doctors, both of whom know that this is what we call a coroner's case. They know they have to notify the police, and it takes them 4 hours to get around to it. It was immediately after midnight.
And Dr. Greenson was present when she was telling you that?
Yes, he was.
And he didn't disagree?
No, he did not.
Why would the watch commander, Sergeant Clemens, why would he lie? What does he have to gain by lying? He worked his whole life to get into that position, a trusted position, an honorable position. And to be discredited like that is just terrible. Until his death, he never changed his story. In today's world, in 2023, okay, no doctor would get away with this. You don't call the police for 4 hours. The sergeant on duty that night is the first officer on the scene. He says it was staged and it was obvious. And the story is ridiculous. This is what Eunice Murray says, the maid, that she was concerned because Marilyn had the phone in her room and fell asleep with her phone in her bed, and usually she leaves the phone outside of her door. That raised suspicion or from Eunice that something might be wrong. And when Dr. Greenson gets there, they broke a window to get into Marilyn Monroe's bedroom. Why would Marilyn Monroe have her door locked in her own home with her housekeeper, Eunice Murray, in the house? Why would she have her bedroom door locked? It doesn't make any sense. It's ridiculous. When the second officer arrived, he said he saw glass mostly on the outside of the house, not on the inside. So they were so lazy that they didn't even walk outside the house and break the window into the inside, or they just didn't know. They just forgot, or they made a mistake. But basically there was glass on the outside. That's how they got into the bedroom, because the door was locked, which doesn't make any sense at all. It looked like an overdose. Almost sure it was. But in the end, her lower intestines were completely discolored. The only way that could have happened was by an enema. They said she had no needle marks. They looked up and down her body. They found no needle marks. The only way scientifically the facts would fit is if she had an enema. And the only person that could have administered that to her was Dr. Greenson, maybe with assistance from the housekeeper, Eunice Murray, but ultimately at the direction of Dr. Greenson. So Dr. Ralph Greenson is a very lucky man that he got away with no charges, that he wasn't charged at all, and he should have been charged with murder. At 7 p.m., Dr. Greenson was at the house because he had a phone call and he said Marilyn was not home. He staged the scene. He lied to the police. He had motive. He had opportunity. And he had that time. So he made this happen. He decided to murder Marilyn Monroe. He went in the dark of the night. He slipped in there, that fucking weasel, and he murdered Marilyn Monroe. Because he had the opportunity and he had the motive, and he did it, and it worked. He protected his legacy until someone like me comes around and points it out that he was busted and that he's a complete scumbag. Any doctor that gets a patient hooked on drugs and addicted like that, and in the end they all agree that they should have sent it to the grand jury. But it was too late. Remove all the fluff, all the distractions, based on the coroner's report, based on his observations, based on the watch commander at the West Los Angeles Police Department, LAPD, Sergeant Clemens, the first officer on the scene. His statement alone, who said it was staged and they flip-flop on their stories. Dr. Ralph Greenson is guilty of murder. premeditative first-degree murder. That's my opinion. Premeditative first-degree murder. He needed to rub her out. But in the end, she didn't deserve to die like that. She was on top of her career. She was a classical, theatrical actress. She was a thespian, top-class thespian, best in show, top of the line, the best of the best. And she was taken out at a young age of 36 years old by a disgraced piece of crap doctor. Scum of the earth. We busted your ass. Die in hell, you piece of shit. Die in hell, you piece of shit. You're busted, motherfucker. He killed Marilyn Monroe and got away with it.
I wanna be loved by you, just you, nobody else but you. I wanna be loved by you alone.
Rest in peace.
With my baby, by and by.
But send that rainbow to me, then my
all ashore, last call, all ashore.
Oh, you'll be gone for a while. I know that I'll be smiling with my baby by and by. Bye bye, baby. Remember you're my baby when they give you the eye. Although I know that you care, won't you ride and declare that though on the loose you...
That's gonna do it for today's episode. If you like this video, please give it an old thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already, and share it with a friend if possible. Thanks for watching, I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. TVG,